Middle America is a place of cultural non-distinction. Radio and television announcers, I've been told, come from out here because our voices are without distinctive character, without accent, so we could just as well come from anywhere or nowhere. Ideas, the presumption goes, don't come from the prairies. Fashion doesn't come from the plains. When a series of sculptures were purchased for the Nebraska segment of Interstate 80, a Nebraska committee selected only pieces from somewhere else. I guess the experts' theory was that Nebraska doesn't produce art. How about food? Is there any food other than wheat coffee that characterizes Plains cuisine? You bet there is. Right inside this door is real Plains food.
Hi, good evening. Welcome to the Golden Nugget. Would you follow me, please? I need another plate.
Thank you.
She had hands.
Looks very good. Looks like good Nebraska beef. Don't try to tell the folks in the Golden Nugget Cafe in Bolus, Nebraska about tofu and kiwi fruit. The culinary fads and fears of the rest of the country run into a solid brick wall on the plains.
T-bone, medium well, and hash browns.
So, while little pats of fish with white sauce and 2 stalks of thin asparagus may have become de rigueur with urban gourmets, great hunks of beef and plenty of potatoes remain the standard on the rural plains. I know you can find steak in Boston or San Francisco. I've had steak in Boston and San Francisco. And you can find seafood in Nebraska or Kansas. But trust me, enjoy your seafood in Boston and San Francisco and order steak in beef country. Cuts of meat like this don't just come from ordinary cows. Immense amounts of money and skill and experience are devoted to producing lean and tasty cuts of beef. Raising beef animals is an enormously expensive and risky business, nothing being left to accident. Beef animals are fed a carefully planned diet with an eye toward producing precisely the quality of meat the market demands.
Hi, welcome to the Golden Nugget.
Yes, it is. Very good, isn't it?
Food is rarely a matter of nutrition, however. When it comes right down to it, all food is soul food, nourishing our emotions and memories as much as our bodies. And on the plains, steak means something special. Not just food, but our kind of food.
Mm-hmm. Really. T-bone with baked?
I sure don't want to take anything away from the folks who raise turkeys, chickens, hogs, or sheep. I enjoy fish and salads. But steak is a regional specialty, just as surely as Texas chili, southern grits, or down east chowder. On the plains, steak is not just food, not just nutrition. Out here, this is cuisine.
Up next on Postcards from Nebraska.
I've always been impressed that for Dannebrog, the village cemetery isn't a sad or scary place. It's quiet and even solemn, but somehow not sad or scary. I think it's because even though our Dannebrog friends and kin are gone, in the village cemetery, they're not really gone. They're still here in Dannebrog, where they always were, and now always will be. Out on the edge of town, on a hill graced by some of the oldest and grandest trees in the community, is Dannebrog Cemetery. Actually, the cemetery is more populous than the town. Even though my hometown is only a century old, more people have died here over that time than live here now. I suppose this cemetery is pretty much like any small town cemetery. It's hard for me to say what's typical because Dannebrog's the only small town I've ever lived in. Cemeteries are the ultimate archive of our tradition and our history. Here, our town's history is, as they say, writ in stone. This is the final resting place of the founders of our town and of the first settlers. Stories of disease and disaster, of faith and triumph. Where little other art remains, there is the art of the stone. Lambs for children, for example. Where did the pioneers find their pride? In brotherhood, as these fraternal markers attest. In ethnic origin. In occupation. In sacrifice for the new homeland. I've lived most of my life in the city, so I've had a chance to see some of the differences in cemeteries. Where I grew up, cemeteries are huge and therefore very impersonal. The names there were unfamiliar to me and therefore meant little. But even after my short tenure here in Dannebrog, these names have become a part of my life. Rod Hatt was one of my best friends. He died too young, and it was pretty much his own fault, even he admitted that, but he went the way he wanted to go. Bumps Nielsen was a dear friend. Our town hasn't been the same since he's been gone. Dora Jean Fries. Now there was a sweetheart. This is the most recent burial site. A young, very young victim of a gun accident. I've always been impressed that for Dannebrog, the village cemetery isn't a sad or scary place. It's quiet and even solemn, but somehow not sad or scary. I think it's because even though our Dannebrog friends and kin are gone, in the village cemetery, they're not really gone. They're still here in Dannebrog, where they always were, and now always will be. While they were alive, these folks went past the cemetery on their way to pick sand cherries, or to school, or to buy groceries, or to bring their friends and relatives to rest. Now we pass by and remember them. I've never much liked the idea of cemeteries, maybe because they seem so alien to the life and vitality of a community, but not in small towns, not in Dannebrog. Here, the cemetery seems to be a part of that life and vitality, not just a place that we come for funerals and Memorial Day, but a daily reminder of that curious combination of eternity and finality that we find in death.
When Postcards from Nebraska returns,
There's a secret ingredient in these quilts from the Kensington Circle. There's a warmth that new manufactured quilts can't quite match. This is an awful lot of work to go to.
Yes, but that's what makes it precious.
Century ago, I was organizing an exhibit of traditional arts, and I was looking for quilters. Someone told me I should come here to Trinity Methodist Church in Lincoln, Nebraska. They said that there was a group of ladies who gathered here every Tuesday for generations to quilt. So I did come here, and sure enough, there were the ladies of the Kensington Circle, laughing, talking, stitching.
And you should have seen Eunice. She made a calendar.
There have been a lot of changes in the 20-some years since I first came here. Some of the Kensington Circle ladies I talked with in the early 70s are gone. And there are some new faces around the quilting frame. Well, which one of you's been here the longest, a member of the group?
I don't know. It's been.
You don't know?
I don't know how long I've been here. I really don't.
20? 15, 20 years?
Something like that.
Something like that. 15 to 20 years.
His group has been at these frames since the 1920s, making warm covers for the needy, quilting fancy coverlets to generate funds for their church. They really are treasures because we very rarely use our quilts anymore as bed covers. We hang them on the wall as if they're art.
That's right. It's really a work of art.
The gatherings are an opportunity for conversation and community as much as they're a task of charity.
Martha here has won some prizes on her quilts.
From the Middle Ages to the American frontier, cloth was hard to come by. You grew animals and plants for fiber and spent endless hours twisting thread and weaving cloth. Clothing had to last a long time, and in the end, the last tattered scraps were cut and resewn into quilts. And you'll have this done today.
Oh, yes, we'll have it done.
These days, as often as not, quilters deliberately cut brand new cloth into geometric figures and then sew them back together into new kaleidoscopic configurations. On the other hand, in many ways, the process of quilting is unchanged. Here in the Kensington Circle and throughout the centuries. Is wearing your thread around the neck like that an idiosyncrasy of yours?
It must be. I'm the only one that does it.
And where did you learn how to do that?
Well, my mother told me that was how it should be done, and so I suppose, you know, she did it, and so it's always here, and I don't have to look for that spool of thread.
I suppose that's where you learn this, isn't it? I mean, you don't go to school or learn it in class. You learn it from mothers and aunts, I suppose?
My grandmother and my mother both quilted, and but I didn't start until 15 years ago.
The work is demanding and exact. The pride of the traditional artists never wavers. The beauty of the final product, even with patterns that are ancient and constantly repeated, never pales.
They're nice and warm.
The fact of the matter is, these ladies could probably just go over to the local Kmart and buy a warm bed cover for a few dollars instead of spending long days making one. What do you charge for a quilt?
It depends upon the size, how complicated the quilting is, and how many days it takes. That one will run around $125 to $135, $40. Because it's going to take us a number of days to do it.
$125 for 5 people working 4 or 5 days.
About a nickel an hour.
About a nickel an hour.
Yep, that's the way it is.
But there's a secret ingredient in these quilts from the Kensington Circle. There's a warmth that new, manufactured quilts can't quite match. This is an awful lot of work to go to.
Yes, but that's what makes it precious. You know, if you want to hand that down to your family, and it's fun to do, it's addictive. You can't quit.
The component that makes some quilts beautiful beyond their piecing and stitching, warmer than the quality of their fibers, that gives them that radiant glow, is love and pride. The enduring love and pride of Trinity Methodist's Kensington Circle. I don't see Nebraska on here.
Here's Nebraska, right here.
And now, a Postcards from Nebraska Extra.
Out here in the Great Plains, we have to use whatever's available, and the posts are more important than the wire, because without the post, the wire's laying on the ground.
Joe Jeffrey is a veterinarian and rancher in central Nebraska, and he's a fence post
No trees out here. This was a barren grass country, absolutely no trees. I can show you pictures of our ranch back in the 1800s where there weren't any trees. So the farmers and ranchers brought in whatever they could, the hedge posts from back on the Missouri River, or the pine posts as they came back from the Oregon Trail, from the mountains. That's just kind of a regular post.
Joe Jeffrey says he's found over 700 different kinds of posts. That one's a strange one. This
yeah,
one
that's Someday, it'd be fun to know where that came from.
It sure would. One of the most distinctive features of the plains is its fences. And they are distinctive because they aren't at all distinctive. They're almost invisible, nearly non-existent. In most cases, they're little more than sticks or thin bars of metal with a couple of strands of barbed wire stretched between them, enough to keep the cattle in or the cattle out, but not the sort of thing that fires the romantic imagination, like the stone walls or rail fences of the woodland east. But here, where there were and are so few trees at such enormous distances, there was no alternative until barbed wire came along. Even then, it was a constant struggle to find something tall enough and strong enough to carry the horizontal twists that might stretch for miles around a single pasture or field.
We have 50 miles of this kind of fence. 50 miles on our ranch. We have about 6,000 acres, so we have 50 miles. And great-granddad homesteaded us in 1874, and he was an Irish Scotchman, so you know he didn't spend any money on fence posts. So we've got hedge, and we've got bedposts, and we've got wagon parts and machinery parts. There's an old split cedar, plain old steel post. And here's even another kind of, they threw their old post down on the ground. This one here's got serial numbers on it, dates. Those are special burrs.
Yeah, it was meant to keep that flat so something could move over it. That's what made me think maybe a manure spreader or something. But
then the ones you'll find around the Mission, South Dakota, and even over around the south central Nebraska are the original cavalry posts. They brought these along on their wagon trains, augured them into the prairie sod, put their ropes through there, and instant corrals. Down along the river down here, just east of the house, the neighbor used his porch support. I think he changed and remodeled his house. Here's a porch support, used it to hold up the barbed wire. Here's one made out of car batteries. This is a brand new one. That's a brand new one.
It's made out of what?
Car battery casings.
It's a windmill leg.
It's the leg of a windmill tower. Yeah.
I recognize that.
Yeah.
That's because I've seen where what did you take off the rest of the leg?
We will use anything to hold up our wire to keep our cows in.
Even commercial posts if you have to buy them.
If we have to get that desperate, yes, we will go to town and buy some posts.
Part of the folklore of the plains is the marking of fences by inverting cowboy boots on the posts, a way of making the insignificant notable, the prosaic interesting, the invisible obvious. Frankly, I wonder how many of these fence posts are the products of expediency, simply responses to need and scarcity, and to what degree they are deliberate gestures toward whimsy and eccentricity. I like to think that, like boots on fence posts, those fence post oddities are tucked away in this vast landscape by fence builders and menders on purpose. They remind us that even though the wire itself was a product of a factory somewhere in the east or overseas, individual creativity and personality is alive and well, even here.
Still to come on Postcards from Nebraska.
The Crazy Horse murder in the late summer of 1877 is only history to some, but he remains a figure of reverence, respect, and mystery to others, even today. Charles Trimble is a spokesman for the Lakota people.
We grew up with stories of our leaders, not in the textbooks. They were absent from our textbooks, but among our people.
Crazy Horse, the hero and victor of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, died right here in this very spot. He was deceived into surrendering to military authorities here at Nebraska's Fort Robinson. He was led to the fort's jail. This replica stands today in the very same place. When he realized the deception, he pulled back and was stabbed to death, unarmed, defenseless. This rugged, magnificent landscape surrounding this site in northwestern Nebraska, so important to American history, was once Lakota land, and in many ways still is.
It has tremendous meaning. You know, it has meaning of homeland. The land is sacred because it does carry the bones and the spirits of our people.
The Crazy Horse murder in the late summer of 1877 is only history to some, but he remains a figure of reverence, respect, and mystery to others, even today. Charles Trimble is a spokesman for the Lakota people.
We grew up with stories of our leaders, not in the textbooks. They were absent from our textbooks, but among our people. You know, they were great heroes. They were people that were talked about. Not only Crazy Horse, but especially Crazy Horse.
Is the importance of Crazy Horse among young Lakota growing or fading away?
With the schools on the reservations, Indian studies is very important in terms of helping the children understand themselves. In the Indian studies of the students, Crazy Horse emerges as a great hero.
There are no photographs of Crazy Horse. His definitive biography is Nebraska author Maury Sandoz's fictionalized account. The location of his grave is unknown. We do know that his mother and father took his body and disappeared into these hills and buttes, hiding his remains so they could not be desecrated. What was the spirit of Crazy Horse?
Spirituality, sacredness.
Charles Trimble plays an important role in the way history is presented and understood in Nebraska today.
Crazy Horse really symbolizes, I think, the spirit of our people. And perhaps because you can't see him, you know, or we've never seen him. We've heard all about him. He's very real to us. As you saw more activism in the 60s and 70s, the Crazy Horse really emerged as, you know, the greatest leader among our people. And the never giving up, you know, the fighting to the end and never admitting defeat.
There are Lakota who assure me they know exactly where Crazy Horse's remains rest. The problem is, when Lakota, Sioux, Indians, can be convinced to reveal the whereabouts of Crazy Horse's grave, they each point to a different hill, or valley, or rock, or cave. There is some suggestion within the circles of wise Lakota elders that to ensure against the feared desecration, Crazy Horse's remains were constantly moved from site to site and eventually divided into separate sacred bundles. In that case, one could legitimately point to almost any rise or swale and say in all honesty, that is the final resting place of Crazy Horse. There's a trend these days to build monuments to symbolize respect for Indians. Far more important than the symbolism, however, is the respect itself. Not only for specific historical figures like Crazy Horse being carved into this mountain in the Black Hills of South Dakota, but for the lore, learning, and people of the first Americans themselves. There are still things to learn after all, and people to know and learn from.
He's part of the earth. He's all over. And it's of little, very little, if any importance to Lakota people where he is buried. And of course, to most historians, the place of burial is very, very important. So the question remains open to many people, but on the reservation and throughout Indian country, it doesn't matter at all.
Sounds to me like you hope they never find out.
Yes.